Welcome to the State Network podcast. I'm Jim Sparks, and I'm here with Ed Covert of Camp Redwood Glen. Hello, Ed Covert.
Good afternoon, Jim. Good morning, I guess.
Yeah, we're right in the middle of it. It's Ed's birthday. Happy birthday, Ed.
Oh yeah, thank
Very
you.
exciting.
Yeah, they keep coming.
Every year. It's the gift that keeps on giving. Ed has been the director of 3 camps in the Western Territory and has been the national camp liaison for many years. How many years have you been doing that?
About 10 this go around.
Nice. Yeah. And what that means is Ed represents camps outside of the Salvation Army and talking with the national camp organizations, and then also works with all of our camps and gives us information in the United States. How many camps do we have in the United States? It's like 40 something?
Yeah, about 45 that are operating every year throughout the year, and then a few that are core operated that,
right.
Depending on the core budget, may or may not be able to operate. We have a couple of core camps that are pretty consistent in their operation, like Camp Gifford here in the West. But
yeah, we have like Camp Lummi is a little island, little place that is considered a camp, but is operated like you said.
Yeah,
that's the only place I haven't been in the West, and I'd love to get to that little Camp Little Lummi Island.
Yeah, beautiful spot.
It only takes just a few seconds of listening to Ed to understand the deep level of care and passion he has for the camping ministry. Ed currently lives in Scotts Valley with his wife, Mary Ann, and they have 2 grown daughters that are pretty awesome. Taylor is a first grade teacher, and Claire is on staff at Camp Del Oro. She is a camp girl. And they're both natural camp girls. In fact, Taylor lives at camp. That's I just put that together too. So they are both awesome staff members. I got to watch them in action and are not afraid of the stage at the campfire. That's for sure. They have at it there. Before we get into it, we always talk one segment on youth culture, and this is a little different. This is no resource, no article this time. This is just talking a little bit, and we're not going to go into a long period on it, but a lot of camps have canceled this summer, and it's brutal. There's no way around it. And so Ed, what does that mean for you? Obviously, it's obviously there's sadness and stuff because your camp is not going to be operating normally this summer. But just some initial thoughts on the canceling of camp.
Yeah, it was really painful. It was an agonizing decision. Yeah. You know, when you think of summertime, camp is one of those rites of passage. Ought to be one of those things that. Every kid has the opportunity to look forward to go, and as our camp ministry has developed and evolved over time, what we're able to do in a week's time in the life of a kid is pretty significant. And I just think about parents that turn to the Army for support and service who now don't have that whole week of camp, whether they see camp as a week of respite or they just recognize that camp is an important component of their child's summer. It's gone. I had a Zoom call with a number of our staff from the summer just to inform them that we weren't going to be able to go forward with camp. And when their faces popped up on the screen, I had to look away because it was so gripping to see the faces of these young people who desperately wanted to do something meaningful in the life of kids this summer, and to have to give them such disappointing news was crushing. But having said all that, I'm just really confident that it was the right decision.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're right. It is the right decision, and it is. There's so much to camps, and you spoke of the impact it has on kids, but we can't underestimate the impact that it has on the staff and what that does for not only just their leadership development, but just kind of life changing things. You do a summer, and like you get a summer to kind of maybe evaluate different parts of your life, or radically change parts of your life too. And so there's a hole with that missing as well. I'm bummed because my son was going to have a chance this summer to get his feet wet a little bit and experience that, but he's got to wait another year. It's just it is tough. But one thing that is cool with like your staff, like you were saying, is that it is a family, and you could still you still have that. You still have those experiences that they could still connect with, and still kind of maybe talk through some of those things, life still, just not at the camp. Ed, you shared a resource with a bunch of camp people about, it was a survey given to parent, given 2 parents? No, given 4 parents, by parents. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. And there was some really interesting feedback. And but the one thing that really stood out to me is, several times they said they did not want virtual camps in response to canceling camps. And to me that shows kind of the strength that camp has in being like a place of residence away from things. Yeah. I don't know if that's the way you kind of took it, but to me it was like I know without a shadow of doubt I cannot get anywhere close to the same experience if someone was talking to me, even if it's in the actual camp that I go to through the screen, than to being there, to feel things, to smell things, to be able to, walk on a trail amongst redwoods in your case. What was your thought on that? Yeah,
we are definitely wired for community. And I think that, every parent knows in the depth of their heart that the need for kids to get. You know what that really reminded me of was that story in Mark's gospel where parents were bringing their children to see Jesus, and this big crowd was pressed all around him. And the disciples, because kids really didn't have much standing in those days. And so the disciples were doing their best to keep the kids away from Jesus so that he could teach to the gathering crowd of adults and all that. And Jesus saw what was happening. He said, no, wait a second. You got this all wrong. Make a way for these kids, to come to me. And so they did. And I could just picture in my mind's eye these kids, whenever you've been away from your kids for a while, or your nieces or nephews, and they see you for the first time, they don't just sort of saunter up to you and say, how you doing? They come charging in after you. They want that physical connection. And in reading that and recognizing that less than a third of the parents in the survey wanted any kind of virtual thing, they were hungering for this physical sense of community for their kids to come. And in our case, because of the faith foundation is so strong, I believe that parents recognize that, I don't want it virtually. I want my kids to experience this life-changing faith experience that they can have when they're gathered with kids who want to take steps towards Jesus, staff that are taking steps towards Jesus, an experience out in the beauty of creation, that just the general revelation of God's genius is all around him. I think not only kids hunger for that, but parents are desperate to get their kids back to camp for another dose of that.
Yeah, it's funny how as life changes, you think differently. But I remember I worked 10 summers, I think, and how much fun I had, and how it was incredible to work with the kids, and even most difficult kids. It was super fun, and it was a blast. And I recognized the life-changing power that camp had, and that and then it certainly brought a lot of people to Christ. But when I sent my own kids to camp, it was a different level of excitement of like, I can't wait for them to experience what that is, and them get to meet some incredibly cool people that love Jesus and want to love them and teach them and all that stuff. It just, I couldn't wait to get them to go to camp. And the weird part for me, I think when I was not a parent, I was like, oh, I want to be there with my kids to experience. But I didn't. I wanted them to go, and I didn't want to be there. I didn't want them to know. I wanted them to have the full camp experience. I didn't want that to be anything about me or my wife. And we kind of had the same feeling. Because we knew that A, it's a safe place. And B, it's a time for them to get away from things and to be able to experience this new culture and be immersed in this new culture and to just see Christ in a new way and different expressions. And so, yeah, I mean, it's brutal to not be able to send my kids to camp this summer, but we know that next year is coming, and we will be able to do it next year.
Yeah,
it's a weird experience. Ed, with canceled camps, can you just give like a little brief overview of like what the conversation's happening in camps now, and maybe looking at the future?
Yeah, so I think this is one of those rare opportunities and seasons for us in camp. Most of us had already completed our planning and preparation for summer 2020. And so now we've got all of this great creative energy in a nice package that we can kind of set on the shelf right now in anticipation of summer 2021. But right now we can begin to work even a year ahead to 2022 and begin I think with all of this time to be able to be a year ahead of myself is pretty fantastic, because I can, as I head into summer 2021, I'm going to be able to look at my planning for 2022 and say, okay, well, here's what we discovered now, and all I got to do is a little bit of a tweak for 2022, because I'm going to keep rolling a year ahead of myself.
Yeah. So
that's a benefit. I think the other thing that is critically important for us to do in this time, as we think about the future, is that when we're able to really charge into whatever creating a new normal looks like, we've got to begin where we want to go. We can't pick up where we left off. And I don't think that that's a subtle difference. I think if we come through all of this stuff and we feel like, okay, now we can breathe and we can just pick up where we left off, we have missed a golden opportunity that the Lord has just kind of laid out before us to take this time and to really carefully, thoughtfully, and prayerfully assess the needs of our kids and the families that we serve, and to be really kind of deconstructing our program model, and to look at those things that work and those things that we need to reassess and to reimagine and to rebuild and to retool, and so that when we roll out of this, we're starting at the place where we want to go. We're not just picking up where we left off.
Yeah, and that's a very, very good point. I think that's not limited to just camps either. It's there's nothing that's going to be the same. And we probably shouldn't go back to what we try to mimic exactly what we were doing before. This has been such a disruption that it's not going to be the same. But with disruption comes opportunities and different looks, and that's a very positive way to look at moving forward. And yeah, I mean, and strangely, I don't know, there's an element of excitement with some of that too, of maybe there's things that in our programs that we're like, this is an opportunity for us to finally do away with it. Like it's kind of been one of those things that everyone knows, but we don't really want to. And now that, everything's been shut down for an indefinite amount of time, kind of, maybe it's time for new growth, and look at this as maybe a pruning time for some of our program areas or methods. And I don't want to sound negative, like things were bad by any means, but like you said, we're we're as programmers, we're given time right now, and time could really help shape future programs. That we didn't have before.
It's a great opportunity for new learning. A friend of mine has this illustration of a cycle of increasing awareness. It starts with disturbance and then moves into chaos. And then from chaos, it moves into a season of letting go. And from letting go, it leads to the next part of the cycle is learning. And this cycle of increasing awareness just is continuous through life if we recognize it for what it is. And I think this whole season obviously has begun with great disturbance. Things aren't as they were, aren't as they're going to be. It threw us all into a various state of chaos, whether it's in your home or in your job or in the ministry that you lead. There's this sense of chaos. And nobody wants to be stuck in chaos. But in order to move from chaos to learning is this period of letting go where you really assess what are the things that I really need to fight for control over? What are the areas that I need to rethink or to retool or reimagine? And what do I let go of in order for me to embrace this new learning? And it's a powerful image and metaphor for me. And I just really, I just think this is one of those times where, man, we could come out of this with some unbelievable learning that could launch us into, powerful and effective ministry over the next 10 or 20 years.
Yeah, that's true. And that's a good thought. I mean, we don't want another pandemic, so
No.
but let's make the most of the situation now.
Yeah.
Let's get into some questions, Ed. The first one is it's a question that should really be asked of any camp person. I laughed when the first camp directors conference I went to. It was recognized at the camp directors conference how many camp directors had been fired, and that was shocking to me. I was like, oh my gosh, I never even got in trouble. What I should have gotten in trouble. I mean, I lit a cabin on fire. Well, someone else lit a cabin on fire, but I witnessed it. And and we got early curfew for one night on staff devotions night, which meant that we didn't get early curfew. So we kind of won in the end. But give us a great prank that you did as a camp staff member. Not that we condone any of this kind of stuff.
Oh, man.
Give us one good one.
You're asking for secrets that I'm reluctant to acknowledge or affirm. But
I don't want anything that might cause us to call authorities of any sort.
So I won't identify the camp, but probably one of my favorites was as a camp. I was the program director, and we'd had a long summer, and it was a good one, and the staff had overcome some interesting challenges along the way, and it really drew us together, and I wanted to it was kind of our last closing circle opportunity to get everybody together, and I really wanted to pour my heart out to them of thanks and appreciation for making this magical summer. But all in the back of my mind, I had this great prank plan. So I had I'd staged a couple of the maintenance guys in strategic locations, and I had the rest of them.
It's always the maintenance guys, by the way.
Yeah, had the rest of them up on the roof of the building that I had everybody sitting out from under this, that were sitting up under this awning. And they had 55 gallon trash cans full of water up on the roof. And so I get all the staff kind of gathered under the awning, the eave overhang. And I just said to them, you guys, you always sit as far away from me when I want to talk to you. And so I just really want to share with you, would you guys just scoot out just a little bit? So I had them all kind of gathered and huddled right at the drip line of the roof eave. And so I'm just pouring my heart out to them and just looking deep into everybody's eyes and trying to get them to fully engage. And I see the maintenance guys creeping up to the crown of the roof. And then they had like 8 of these 55-gallon trash cans full of water, and they just poured them over. And this tidal wave of water comes cascading down off of the roof. saturating everybody. And I'm watching all of this happen. And then once they're all soaked, they're all in a tear after me. So I go running down this big long lawn area to where there were a couple of more maintenance guys with fire hoses that were already charged, waiting for me to get past. And then they unloaded the fire hoses on everybody. That was a fun one, which led to quite an afternoon of water fighting. Probably my favorite one was I'd gotten wind of a couple of guys that were going to completely toilet paper the flag and the trees and all the area right out in front of the dining hall. Just on the last night of camp, they were going to have this big grand send-off. Mm-hmm. And I got wind that they were going to do it. So they got out of camp. They knew I'd probably be done with my rounds by about 12:30. So at some time between 12:30 and about 3, they toilet papered all of this stuff up in the trees and ran stuff up the flagpole and the all of the deck boards around the railings of the deck and all that. And I came back out at about 3:30 and I cleaned everything up. There wasn't a stitch of toilet paper or anything left. And then we all came back down to the flagpole in the morning, and they were beside themselves with who did this? What on earth happened? And not a one of them suspected. And if they're hearing this now, they'll know who it was.
I love the cleanup prank. I've cleaned up several pranks, and I strangely have found more joy in cleaning up a prank before they get to see it executed to everybody. You're right. The look on their face is like, what on earth happened? Yeah. Like, how could this go wrong? And you're right. They don't even think like it could be you.
Right.
They're usually, it's like their rivals or figured it out. But I have one that definitely do not ever do. I'm being very careful. I have done a lot of pranks in my life. But one that was a complete backfire and just a very poor judgment of leadership. But I was walking down a hill, and there, for some reason at camp, it's not uncommon to see like campers' underwear just lying in the road or the dirt. I've never understood it because no campers have ever claimed them. I was like, why is there? And then I looked, and it was not a very clean pair of underwear. So I picked it up, and I was like, you know what? My friend lives right over here, and so I'm just gonna pick it up with a stick, and I put it on his bed. Just stupid, right? I was 20. I'm dumb, right? I was a program director, and so I'm down the hill, and I could see up the hill so that I could see some action if need be. I'm not a person who does pranks that needs to see the response, by the way. So, but I'm looking up, and running down the hill is like the nicest staff member you've ever seen. And he's the kind of guy, you always have that staff member that carries around a guitar full time and like has like squirrels sitting on his shoulder, and he's singing to everyone and everyone loves him. That's this guy. And he's running down the hill, and he's just got the most horrified look on his face. And he's like, Jim, there has been a major, major incident. I was like, what happened? Because when someone tells you there's a major incident in camp, ambulance is called, all that.
Yeah.
And I go, what happened? And he goes, Jim, someone has done something to me that is just unbelievably awful. I was like, who would do anything to you? You're like the nicest guy on the whole of camp. He goes, someone put a dirty pair of camper underwear on my bed. I was like, someone put a dirty pair of camper underwear on your bed? I go, what are you talking about? I go, aren't you in room A? And he's like, yeah. I go, aren't you on the top bunk? And he goes, no, I switched. I'm on the bottom bunk now. I was like, oh. And so I said the other guy's name. I go, he's not on. No, we switched. And I was like, oh man. And I felt so horrible. I was like, oh, look, I'm just being very transparent. I go, I'm gonna try to find out who did that to you. Because I panicked, and then a couple hours later, I was like, "Look, I got to be very honest with you. This is what I did, and it was so stupid. I had more egg on my face than I could have ever imagined. But the look on that guy's face was traumatic, and I'm sure he tells people to this day that, Oh yeah, well one time my boss put underwear on my sleeping bag. I'm like, oh, great, but no, we've had some fun. One that we did at Gilmore, we actually vacated all of the campers out of camp at 6:00 in the morning and took them out to the park because the program staff at the time wasn't ever coming to flag raising. They were just being lazy and sleeping in. And so we took them all and we arranged for breakfast out in the park. The cooks were in on it. And we had video of the program staff coming down to the flagpole and freaking out. And then they're running around trying to find all the campers and they could not figure out what was going on. That was fun. And the kids loved it, of course. But anyway, we could talk about that stuff all the time. Don't do pranks. They're not worth it in the end. So, Ed, you went back to school recently. And so tell us why and what you went back to school for.
Yeah. So I went back for a graduate degree in outdoor adventure leadership and evangelism, and great experience. But the reason I went back, I've been involved with the Army's camp ministry for well over 30 years now, and the first 15 or so years, I was just really charged up. I mean, I'm super excited about what I was doing and new opportunities. There was growth and change personally, all of those things. And I just got to a point where the Lord just challenged and convicted me on the fact that, look, past experience and previous success are not necessarily going to be an indicator of future success, because this is a very dynamic ministry that I've called you into, and I need you to stay faithful and to keep charging on this. And so that God began to stir something in my heart, and then I was in a Bible study about some of the kings of Israel. And one of the things that the Lord used in that Bible study was that there were a lot of kings and some pretty good ones, but not very many of them that finished well. And I really, for the sake of the ministry of camping and the people that we serve, I really asked God to help me. Not that I'm a king by any stretch of the imagination, but I wanted to be a person that God could count on to finish well, and I wanted to know from Him what do you require of me in order to finish well. I want to finish the last when my work's done, and I don't think it is yet, but when my work's done in camp, I want to know that the last 15 years were as passion-filled and as driven and as motivated and as inspired as the first 15 years were. Yeah. And that led to some conversations about this program in evangelism. And the combination between outdoor adventure leadership and evangelism was just phenomenal, because it really allowed me to look at how do we contextualize the gospel for the very different kinds of kids that we have coming through camp. When I'm thinking about how are we going to present the gospel to kids who come from migrant farm communities when they want to know about the Jesus that I'm talking about, who says you got to care for the widow, the foreigner, the stranger among you, and those kids every day are having to deal with the uncertainty of I got family that might not be documented, or do people suspect that we're not documented, or I don't see in my community how the foreigner is being loved and cared for the way that you say. And so I want kids to recognize that the gospel, the good news of the gospel is that as Christians we're called to point people to a Jesus that loves you regardless of how you got there. How you get to Him doesn't really matter. He's going to love you unconditionally, and we're going to love you unconditionally. Well, that's a whole different message than what I'm going to give to a kid who comes from an urban setting. I am even even more convicted of this now in light of recent events and Ahmaud Arbery's tragic death, that there are kids who come from an urban setting who what they don't need to know. They don't need me to tell them that the world is a screwed up place and that it's the result of the fall. They want to know that when I say that the God that I want to introduce them to, the Jesus I want to introduce them to, is all about justice. They want to know, what does that justice look like, and how's it gonna? Well, those are two really different messages between the kid who is uncertain about his status as a foreigner. Is he going to be embraced? Is he going to feel a sense of belonging? And a kid who wants to know, well, if God is about justice, if Jesus is about justice, show me what that looks like, because I don't see it in my neighborhood. So being able to think through these issues and to be able to, the traditional ways that we've presented the gospel to kids, the cross has still got to be central to that message. No question about that. But it can't just be that the world's a screwed up place, and it's because of the fall way back in the beginning, and Jesus died for your sins, and now everything's going to be okay, because that's not the world these kids are living in. We've got to be able to contextualize it. So the chance to go back and to rethink some of the ways that we want to present the hope of the gospel to kids in a way that can speak into their current life experience was powerful. So I'm so glad I went back.
Yeah, that's great. One of the things that I don't know if it came directly out of that, but it's something that you've been talking about quite a bit lately, is this creation care, and it's a term that you introduced to me. Tell us what creation care is and why is it important?
Yeah, so it kind of stems from this whole idea of, how are we going to communicate the hope of the gospel to kids? And I think creation care, when you think about in a camp setting, creation. Well, I probably should first say there's a difference for me between creation care and environmentalism. Creation care, I think, speaks to the whole of God's created order, where sometimes environmentalism can be only focused on the man-made impacts on climate change. And while I know this isn't the venue to talk about climate change, I think that's a real phenomena, and there are lots of reasons that impact it. But for me, creation care is really the birthright of every human being. And when I think about, again, kids coming to camp and the full narrative of Scripture, and we've often talked to kids about, we kind of start at the fall and then kind of move forward to the fact that Jesus died for him, and now you can punch your ticket to heaven, and everything's going to be fine. And on the creation care side of things, I've just really felt that, why would you give a kid a book and tell them to start in chapter 3? Why do we not start with what God really intended? And from a creation care perspective, God's original intent was for us to be in this full, rich relationship with Him, and to be in full and rich, meaningful relationship with each other, and in a full, rich relationship with the beauty and the magnificence of all that He had created. That was kind of the original intent. And yeah, you know what? We screwed that all up. And God recognized that we needed to understand that His plan for us is to redeem and restore all of that creation, so that we could be in full and rich experience with Him again, and with each other, and with the beauty of His creation. So for me, creation care and the story that we want to share in a compelling way with kids is that creation begins with God bringing order out of chaos. And when kids come to camp, some of them are living in the midst of chaos. And if we can help them realize that God wants to bring order out of that chaos, And the next act of creation was he brought light to the darkness. And so the amazing thing is, then we can take them right to who Jesus is. And in John chapter 8, verse 12, it says this: Jesus said to the people, "I'm the light of the world." Well, we think back at the very beginning, God brings order out of chaos. He brings light to the darkness, so we never have to live in darkness or the fear of darkness again. And then, and the answer to that was Jesus coming as the light of the world. I mean, the whole narrative of Scripture ties all together. And so, how do we care for this magnificent creation that God has placed us to be caregivers of and to be stewards of? And so that's what this whole creation model is. And Pope Francis said, look, let's care for creation, but by all means, we need to care for the needs of people first.
Yeah.
And so it's not a one or the other. It's caring for, and as a Christian, I think it's our birthright to be the stewards of creation. And I would even suggest that creation care is our Mars Hill moment. As you think of Paul at the Areopagus, and saying, "Hey, people of Athens, I see that you're a very religious people. You've got gods to everything, and even to an unknown God. And let me introduce you to the unknown God, because he's the God over all gods." And for us, creation care is sort of our Mars Hill moment, where we can stand and view the beauty of a sunrise or a sunset with people of varying degrees of faith, and be captured by the awe and the wonder of that, and then be able to say to them, I can see that this sunset, this sunrise moves you deeply, just as it does me. Let me introduce you to the one who created it. Man, creation care is powerful, powerful opportunity for us.
Yeah, that's great. And how can youth workers in both urban and suburban settings practice or even advocate for creation care?
Yeah, that's so there are a lot of really simple, basic things that we can do, not just at camp, but you can talk to your kids about water conservation. They can learn to reuse and to recycle and to upcycle. I mean, there are all kinds of super creative things that you can do by laminating sheets of cardboard together and create. There are an awful lot of basic things. Probably the most important principle, I think, in creation care, especially for a youth worker to convey to their kids, is that the small choices and decisions that we make every day now, because we can make them, will benefit in massive ways to those who don't have the ability or the capacity to make that same choice. So as we do things to save water, and we think about the importance and the value of clean water, and then we can contribute either by praying or raising money. A whole division, the kids in a whole division could raise money and pretty quickly raise enough money to sink a well into for some community outside of the United States that desperately needs clean drinking water. It wouldn't take a whole lot of money to be able to do that. There's some really neat things that are happening in and around the Army world. There's a YouTube video about the women's ministries in India of the Salvation Army that are planting thousands of trees. And the impact that those trees are doing as far as cleaning up the waterways. As they plant trees beside the water, they suck out some of the pollutants that are in the water, and the way that those trees are cleaning the air. So I think the main things for youth workers is to not to feel like it's that creation care is some unrealistic, super time-consuming thing, but it's to make it a regular part of the conversation. Turning lights off in your Sunday school classroom in the middle of the morning when you don't really need them because you got all the windows open. To clean water, to recycling, to planting a tree in the core backyard, or planting a group of trees in the parking lot of the core. Because that's going to clean the air, but it also gives you reason to think about, others. So there are some really simple ways that we can live into that. And I'd challenge every youth worker to read William Booth's book, In Darkest England and the Way Out, because creation care is deeply embedded in the DNA of the Army.
Yeah, I would add to why don't you take your Sunday school to outside?
Yeah,
a lot of our core properties have great spots to do some stuff outside and learning in that outdoor environment. I mean, it works for camp. It could work for us in the core life as well.
Yeah,
and you don't have to be in those buildings. I learned that because they kicked my Sunday school class out of the building. Well, first they kicked us to the kitchen. I literally did Sunday school in the kitchen because we were too loud, and then they eventually kicked us outside. But I found outside to be really well done. But and what I've appreciated, Ed, and talking to you about a lot of this stuff, it's very sometimes with advocating for stuff like this, it could seem insurmountable or just overwhelming, but really, you said it. It's about doing a lot of small things that have larger impact ultimately, just by changing our habits and changing the way we do things or think through things environmentally. And it's pretty powerful. And there are there's some great examples just in the Western United States here of people doing that. I think of Eden Wild digging. She raised money, fundraised, and was able to dig a well and stuff. And so
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's all actually very doable and important. And we'll give some links and some resources for reading in the show notes on this and the postings on our social as well.
I've written a creation care model for salvationists, so I'm happy to give you that to share as well if people are interested.
Yeah, please do.
Yep.
We'll post that. Some leadership questions. I respect you, Ed, as a leader very much. And one of the teaching sessions you did a long time ago when I was still working at camp I think you were just kind of you were changing camps, I think, at the time, or you were taking a sabbatical for 1 year or whatever. And but you led a session that had a pretty big impact on me because it was a very simple question. What would you do if you had to start over as a camp director? Mm-hmm. And I would put that question as, what would you do if you had to start over as a youth director or just a leader in general? And it was impactful, and it's something I do still regularly, and to try to assess where I'm at. So what are 5 things you would do over?
Yeah, wow, that's a really great question. So I think first, I would be less willing to compromise my daily prayer life with the Lord. In the busyness of all that goes on, because I have. In the last 5 years, in particular, my prayer life has changed dramatically, and I have experienced the goodness of God and the faithfulness of God in tough times and in times of great joy and plenty, as a result of seeing God be active in my prayers. Prayer changes things. And so I'd be a lot less willing to compromise my daily prayer life with the Lord. I'd keep more of the promises I've made, but with this caveat, I would make less promises.
Yeah,
I'd make fewer promises. I think early on, my desire was to do everything for everyone all the time. Yeah. And that's just unsustainable, and it doesn't show people, I think, the importance of being able to lead well, set good, healthy boundaries, to acknowledge the needs of people and to create appropriate and acceptable progress towards doing the things that you want. So I would make I'd keep fewer promises because I'd make fewer. I would make. I would keep more of the promises I make because I'd make fewer promises.
Yeah.
I would make family time, a priority, especially during the summer, because life for family doesn't pause during the summer. There's always going to be another summer, but the moments that you can. I read a great book about the power of moments, and the moments that you can make for family are critical. And if I would want to be much more attentive to making moments. Super grateful for God's faithfulness and promise to me in the way that Taylor and Claire have continued to love and embrace the ministry of camp and have grown well. But I would make family a priority, especially during the summer.
Yeah.
I'd probably take more walks through camp with Marianne and hold her hand when we walked, because it's good for the heart of a marriage. And it's important to her when I affirm that I'm married to her and not to camp. And I think those walks through camp also. I'm reminded of in Genesis chapter 13, where God said to Abraham, "Get up out of your tent and go walk around. There's some stuff I want to show you." And in those times of walking around camp and being with Marianne, God reveals Himself to me in some powerful and rich, meaningful ways. I think another thing, as I think about camp, what I would do different if I were starting over is that I'd be more focused on leadership development of staff in orientation and throughout the summer. Be more focused on that than just on campcraft mastery. And so we've taken some time in the last few years to just kind of deconstruct orientation and what we do in terms of the development of staff from a leadership, because I believe camp is a sending ministry. And so my responsibility, one of the charges that God has placed on my heart is that when I send young people out of camp at the end of a season, I want them to be more prepared to engage in active leadership, to recreate the kind of community that they experienced at camp back at their core in their homes or in their neighborhoods or communities. And so while campcraft mastery is super important, I want to know, and I want the Corps officers and other people, when these kids return back to their permanent communities, I want them to know that we've done everything we can to help equip them to be leaders, to contribute to community and society that they return to. So I'd be more focused on leadership development during orientation and throughout the summer. And then last, I'd eat better and exercise more, for sure, because God desires to use all that I can give to Him. And, while I might not have, if I use the metaphor, I won't have the body of a 2020 Mustang GT, but God can get more out of a reconditioned 59 Galaxy than a smashed up GT headed for the junkyard because I didn't take care of it. So I'd eat better and exercise more.
Yeah, awesome. Ed, thank you so much. Just a lot of nuggets of really, really good information for us to digest in this. And we appreciate you and your leadership, your humble leadership, and all that you've not just done for camps, but for the impact that you've had on a lot of young leaders and that are now like full-blown awesome leaders. And appreciate that. Thank you for being here. If you're interested in any of the resources we've talked about, in this episode. We'll link them in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to the Say Network podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or for updates. We're on YouTube as well, actually. And also don't forget to join us every Wednesday night on Facebook at 3 p.m. for Online Youth Night. I think we're in week 9 of those, and those are kind of fun. Kids and parents are invited to watch together. Thank you for listening, and we'll be back next week with a brand new episode because we don't repeat episodes, so we'll always be brand new. Ed, thank you again. I speak on behalf of everyone that we love you.
Thanks, Jim.
I can't wait to go surfing with you when this is all over.
Yeah, me too.
All right, goodbye, everybody.
See ya. Good to see you.